Well, welcome to the second episode, Dale. So this time,
Yep.
we go burgundy to blue, and what a change.
Big change.
Big change.
Massive change.
And a car that I think would probably be one of the most recognisable street machines in Australia.
Yep.
And we're going to go through how that came about, why it happened, and let's get straight into it, eh?
Yeah, get stuck in.
All right. So, homework.
He likes his homework.
Last time I said that we did a rebuild on the engine on the burgundy car before
Yes.
I went to the Summernats. I thought I had the photos, couldn't find them. I found them. So as you can see in front of you, they're 43 hours straight through. So Monday night through. So Rob Fazella, my mate Fuzz, Trev Wilcock, that was the mechanic at the base, we had a taxi base back then. Tony Rowe, the engine builder, my brother Reg, myself, and my mate Bones. We're all hanging around trying to work out why this thing had a knock in it.
Yep.
So I thought I'd throw them in because I just thought that's classic street machining.
Absolutely.
And the photo on the bottom there with the three of us, me, Fuzzy, and Trev, that's 5 a.m. We still look pretty happy.
Must have been a bit of no-dos going around, I think.
I don't know what it was, but we were young and things were a bit easier.
Yep.
So, mate, we're going to go through tonight looking at the burgundy car, as you see there now.
Yes.
So that was Summernats 3. So at that point in time, it had won top 10, best engineered, undercarriage and engine bay, and was pretty stoked about that. It was a fresh build, and we went through the process then of a feature with Street Machine magazine, which was in the last episode, and then we did the circuit, and the last show that car was seen at in that burgundy colour and that guise, I guess, was at the Adelaide Hot Rod Show. And when we went to the Adelaide Hot Rod Show, I had great expectation of achieving a goal which didn't happen. And if you want to know what that's all about, you need to go and watch my biography. I think it's episode 4 or something of the biography. But it was enough motivation for me to go, let's do it again. So before that happened, we were in Adelaide, like I said. The drags were on, so I took the opportunity to take the show car out and give it a run. And remembering where 30-something years ago, it ran a 14.4.
It's not slow.
Untested, untried. Wasn't too shabby. Was relatively happy with that at the time. And then took it home and pulled it apart. And that's it out the front and the drive.
Still with the numbers on the windscreen.
Yeah, still got the 52 on it. Now, Hot Rod Show was normally in May.
Yep.
So I'm presuming, because I keep talking about things and I keep catching myself out. But the Hot Rod Show was always in May. So this is May.
Yep.
I've already started doing the XY for our drive car, for Heather to drive, and then pulled it apart. So we had to get the green one done and then get into the to rock solid. So first, let's pull it apart.
Yep.
And they're all the bits we don't need anymore. So it was interesting that I had a garage sale in Broken Hill and virtually nothing moved. And then the process with the suspension, and I mentioned in a lot of the previous episodes that I spent a lot of time with Mark Sanders, and I met Mark at the 88 Nationals, and I met him walking around the oval, I think with Fuzzy or Hoops or someone, can't remember who was with me that day. And I heard this guy canning the suspension on all the cars, and I actually went up there and said, "Where's yours, mate?" As I would.
As you do.
And then we had a bit of a discussion, and we followed through on that a few times, and that sort of started up what turned out to be a pretty strong friendship in the end. That he had a lot of knowledge about suspension, and a lot of us others like myself didn't necessarily have that same sort of knowledge. So he was based in South Australia. And I ended up doing a deal with him where I said, "You better prove to me how good you are." And he came on as a sponsor from his business called Road Performance Modifications. So the little ad in the paper there was in the Adelaide paper, and I took all that stuff down and sold it from his workshop while we were there doing his suspension. So obviously pull it apart, and as you've seen here, when you pull something apart, it takes up a lot of room.
It does.
And you can see there the engine sitting on a pallet trolley, and that came straight out of an engine bay that had won best engine bay at the previous Summernats. So
Still wasn't happy.
Still wasn't happy. So we're moving right along, and it looks like I've changed extractors because they look like straight out of the box, and I know previously they were black, so I dare say I had some sort of change, and I know I did change the exhaust on it, which there's some photos coming up shortly. So this particular time, I think it's the first time in the life of the car the thing had actually been properly bare metaled, because the first build I didn't know what I was doing. The second build, as we've seen, we just chopped it and put a coat over it. And you'll see in a lot of these photos where it all goes back to bare metal. And these are probably a bit out of sequence because it looks like it's sitting down on its new suspension from down in Adelaide. So the photo there with the beds, what happened was Mark said, I'll do the suspension, just send the car down. And I'm thinking, well, I can't let my baby go on its own. So Louis, I'm not sure what Louis was up to, but he was at a bit of a loose end as well. So him and I went down and we stayed a fortnight at Mark's workshop. Okay. Took down a couple of beds from the motel and
as you do.
Set up camp for a fortnight, and we basically lived there and worked day and night until worked until you'd had enough and get up and go again the next day. So that's sitting on blocks down at Mark's workshop at Road Performance Modifications, RPM, and Mark loved the 9-inch grinder you'll see in some of these photos.
He sure did.
So we had the grinder and the oxy out, and that's me on the polisher there. So the idea was to keep active. Mark was the guy doing the suspension, but we were there to help out, and we had a few other chores that we had planned, and that's Louis over in the Sparks, and he's working on the rear bumper because I decided to box all that in, and he was making the bits up for that and messing around with that. And what Mark had decided to do here, which I probably wouldn't even have thought of, was to actually have the front suspension in the car and sit it at the right height we want, and then tack all those brackets and things he's got there hanging off the front stub axle so that it could be held, the stub axle could be held in a fixed position, so we could remove the wishbone and then make the stainless wishbones to replace them. So that's the way it was done.
Pretty couple of reference points there.
Yeah, pretty basic when you think about it, but that was the way that he did it. And you can see the top mount there where that's welded on. They're the bump stops, the factory bump stops. They were already welded on from a looking good type of situation. So before you could get to the metal, we had to grind all that bog back off.
Must have been a show car.
Must have been a show car, yeah. So you can see there, we talked in the last episode about boxing in the sway bar mounts. So all of that and all the front diagonals all had to go to make way for this new double wishbone setup that we were putting in it. And you can see in that photo, on the left-hand side, it's already got the mounts made for the bottom arm, and the other side is in there with the oxy cutting some holes to make that ability for that to fit. And then he's back on the grinder again, cutting all those diagonals and stuff out of it. So you can see there, it's looking quite empty.
Quite a lot of work.
In the front. And then it blew that bloody great hole in the front end and then mounted that piece of solid with a thread front and back, and then welded that all back up once he had everything set up and in position. So he made the wishbones. So that was all stainless steel. And TIG back then was very new to me. I hadn't sort of had any involvement, and you can tell by the mask he's got on, it's a long time ago.
It is a long time ago, yes.
Yeah. So the ovaries and the gloves, and it's all changed so much today to what we use today. And there he is back on that grinder again. So he's chopping the diff up now. So the 9-inch was the original van diff.
Yes.
And that had then had brackets mounted to it for the ladder bar setup. And we're now in the process of changing from ladder bar. So we went leaf spring with ladder bars initially. In the second build, it went to ladder bar with coilovers. And now we're going to 4-bar with a diagonal. So we'll see that once we get into it a bit. So that's that standard 9-inch, XC 9-inch. And I said to him I really wanted it to be beefed up a bit, with the cross bracing and all like the drag cars were running, because it looked too small underneath previously because there was nothing around it because the tank and all was out of it. So he got a bit carried away.
Yeah, I was going to say sort of exceeded the brief.
The brief was like, yeah, and I think there's a picture somewhere where it's written on it, the super diff.
Yeah.
So it ended up creating some issues trying to get bolts to fit and all because we'd got a bit carried away. But it looked pretty good once
it
was
the super diff.
The super diff. So the big cross brace and all on the back. And Mark, there's a photo there somewhere, Mark had a jig, to weld it all together and keep it straight.
Yep.
And you can see there, the brackets and all for the coilovers was very much what he was doing in South Australia, because he was one of the first people to actually get cars registered in South Australia, which is quite tough with the rego.
Yep.
And he did all the suspension on that EH Legal 8. I don't know if you remember that car. It's still around today. So if I look at I can look at a car and say, I think Sanders did that because the style of the brackets, he had very much his own style. And you can see there the size of the bracketry and the way the coilovers are mounted. And that's it there up in the jig. So that photo there looks like it's probably back at my joint now, and these next runner photos is really more about the detail work. Then once Mark had done what he wanted to do to make it fit and all the rest of it, then I took over with the die grinder and the sander and got to make it look pretty.
Yep.
So he'd chosen to run a Chev front spindle on it because they were effectively all of the tapers and all were what we needed, but the stub axle was almost like a 2 or 3 inch drop compared to the Falcon stub axle, so we could utilise the same point and lower the car by a couple of inches without changing the geometry.
Yep.
So I'd previously ground the Falcon one, so now I'm grinding another set of stub axles, and you
More
can
grinding.
see all the bits and pieces there ground up. And then previously we hadn't diagrammed the diff centre. That was that progression of time where I'm looking at it going, if I'm going to redo this car again, there won't be too much left not done.
Won't be any shortcuts.
Yeah, and it was always, I guess it was always time, but it was also knowledge to go, that looks good painted, and then the next time you go, that'll probably look good ground and painted.
Yep.
And it was like that progression.
That next level. Yep.
To work through that. So this is the first shot of the floor underneath. So we're looking at now, we've gone to 4 bar, so a short top arm, long bottom arm, and everything in double shear. So previously I'd mentioned, like you look at it and go, whoa, it looks a bit dodge. So we're now gone in double shear, and you can see the top shocky mount there now with the plates welded on, where before they were the other way around, just with a single shear. And the same with the 4 bars going forward, and then it's got a diagonal locator now rather than that dodgy panhard off the top of the diff. So theoretically, it should have
it looks the part.
It should have worked a whole lot better. So that was all put in place. So then once all that work was done down in Adelaide, the car obviously went back home, and we had to get in and tidy up some of the areas that now changed. So we now don't have a shocky mounted in the top.
Yep.
So the suspension design was the double wishbone, but then a coilover mounted on the bottom arm through the middle, the top arm.
Yep. And
then mounted to the side of the, there's a photo coming up in a minute to show you where that mount is. So you can see there I've boxed the back of the radiator where the radiator goes in, because all those diagonals are gone now.
Yes.
So
it certainly changed the setup of the car, didn't it?
It looked a bit underdone, like from a strength point of view, but there was so much steel added into this car over the years, it was as strong as an ox. So you can see there inside that tower, the 2 brackets there now. So that's the top mount for the shocky, for the coilover. So now we're in the process of, if anything wasn't boxed, it got boxed. So you can see the back of the radiator support panel. I look at that now and go, well, it's a lot of work for not a lot of gain. But once again, it was all about how do I make it look good? How do we fill it in? And you can see I've had a bit of heat shrink going on one of the flats there. So progressively making the whole thing better and better. So all that beautiful burgundy paintwork we were looking at a couple of weeks ago, Dale.
Yes, it's all tended to disappear.
It's all back under the sander again. And I don't know why I would have ripped all that off, except for the fact that, you know, having issues previously, I didn't want the same problem. So the process this time was that it was going to be back to acrylic. So we'd gone acrylic to 2K and now back to acrylic. And I went back to acrylic because I was going to do it myself this time, do all the work on the gun. And before we could do that, we obviously needed to get everything tidied up, re-bogged and all rubbed out. And I thought this one was pretty good. You can see on the top of the plenum there, someone in Adelaide put Bogzilla on there because they said he had a bog coming out of it when it was ground. And I mean, you know, I can accept that. It had a bit in it. So you can see there now we've got a few extra pipes there, Dale. So
there is a few.
I was looking that I wanted something a bit more in the bay, you know, something to grab the eye. And I thought the nitrous looked pretty cool, and I'd always admired Osnos. He always had a stand in the trade hall.
Yep.
And in the end, it didn't come from there, but because I'm based in South Australia pretty much. So always loved that look, and I really never had a great amount of intention to use it. It was always from a show car perspective. But we talked about this in my biography that in 1989 it was $1,200. So that's a lot of money for looking good.
You'd be adding a nought onto the bottom of that, at the end of that these days.
Yeah.
Easily.
Well, it wouldn't cost you half of that, but that amount of money today is a lot of money.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so that, I guess that was drilled and fitted or something. I can't really remember because I don't imagine I would have done it. So that was pretty much the end of what was happening in the front and rear end. So we've got all that happening. So all of that chrome plated stuff from last time is now for sale.
Yep.
And being sold off. And we're in the process of now getting everything back to bare metal. So you can see the guards in the background there in bare metal. And I noticed on the bottom there, that's Louis Tirana.
Yes.
Must have been in for a polish or something. I don't know what's going on there.
Payment.
Yeah. I think you owe me.
Yeah.
So I took the guards. There was a local guy that was doing some work for the restorers. You know, he had a couple of tanks to dip stuff in, and I took the two guards down and said, "You want to dip these?" And he looked at him and he said, "I'm not dipping them." I said, "No, just they'll be right." And he goes, "No." He said, "I can't. I just can't do it. They're too bloody nice." So I said, "Where's your scraper?" And I give him a scraper, and I just dragged the scraper up him, and I said, "They're not nice anymore.
No.
Chuck them in, mate." So they were dipped, and I'm pretty sure the boot was dipped, but I'm not sure about the doors. So you can see that guard there now, all in bare metal. Now you can see the front stone tray, Dale, or half a stone tray.
Part of, yeah.
One of the issues that I always found with the Falcon is that the join just under the bumper was always a bit ugly, and it was really hard to make. They sort of came like that, and it didn't look good. And back then I probably didn't have the skill to make that any better. So I decided I'd make it flow around the corner. So I cut the lip off and knocked it up and welded it up and put the join behind the number plate. So now there was no joint. So it cleaned it up.
It's just a long looking guard.
It just turned into a real pain to store and to paint. But other than that, it was fine. So externally, I was looking now to do something different, and the whole Hornet scoop thing had started in drag racing. And I bought what was the smallest Hornet scoop. And I got it home and put it on the car and went, can't see that working too well, because I was still looking to potentially maintain, you know, what would appear to be potentially registrable. And I'd seen an XY, I reckon, at the 88 Nationals with a Hornet scoop on it, and it looked pretty tough, and I thought, that's cool, I'll give that a run, you know. So when I got it home, or when it turned up, I went, whoa, wow. So I ended up trimming it down, and you'll see further in, there's some shots of that. And then I've spoken all the way along about that bonnet with all the bog in it, you know, from the first time round, and I thought that bonnet was still on it and would be still on it today, but clearly I'm wrong again, because there's a nice new bonnet.
Yeah.
And
are you going to cut that one up?
I had to cut a hole in it to fit the ram in. And I see further on, you'll see in a minute, there's some photos where it's actually flat underneath there. And I must have decided I wanted it a bit lighter because the amount of bog that was in it, and then I put the Hornet scoop on, it was probably a bit much. So you'll see where we cut that down. And now I'm in the process here now of trying to get things primed. And I noticed that, you know, guards and doors and roof and all are in like a high build.
Yep.
And at that point I was using the old, what was spray putty.
Yeah.
So acrylic spray putty, very prone to shrinking, and if not applied properly, falling off and all sorts of things. But anyhow, it's still together today, so I must have got something right.
You must have applied it properly.
Must have applied it properly. So that's it, back out the front, and it's sitting a whole lot better. So remembering the previous ones, it was way up in the air with no trim and all in it. So now it's at a better height, and once we get some weight in it, it comes down. So I noticed in the engineer's report they were a 15.7 and a 15.10.
Yes.
With a 235 and a 275.
Yep.
60 series front and back. And I don't have any photos of when I did the work, but I deleted the door handles. And there'll be some photos here on the outside of that. So obviously progressing down the track a bit with the bodywork and working through that process. It's interesting, Dale. Remember last week we had a big hole in the parcel shelf?
Yes.
I put some back in it by the look of it because hasn't got such a big hole now. It is 30 something years ago.
It is a while ago, exactly.
So that's that side on profile now, looking a whole lot tougher and
the dragways
looking a bit better. So they were a dragway super light, mini light, super light.
I think you're right. Yep.
I'm going to get the engineer's report out shortly, and we'll talk about that. So I got on the dragway and spoke to them about some wheels and worked out a bit of an arrangement. And away from the strikers and looking more that drag race, and this is prior to the graphics taking over the whole process, but a little bit more drag style, and at that point it's still got the GT grill in it, and of course when we get through a bit further you'll see that I deleted that and went back to a standard grill, and that was really more about making sure the change was very noticeable. It didn't look like the old car. So, you know, the Hornet scoop, different wheels, different grill, different colour,
different stance,
everything was more attuned to being more drag style, I guess. So there's the little lock button. So the actual button itself was like an EB Falcon, and then I just welded a piece of tube in there with a washer in the bottom for it to be able to move up and down. And then on the inside, I actually used a rocker mechanism out of the back door from the inside door lock.
Okay.
So if you imagine a boomerang on a pivot point, so that when you pushed up and down, it pulled backwards and forwards.
Cool.
You got that? Make sense?
That makes sense now.
So then I hooked that up to what was the inside door handle. So when you pulled the inside door handle, the outside button went up and down, and when you pushed the outside button, the inside door handle was all on the one mechanism.
How did you think of that? That's very clever.
I don't know. Must have been laying in bed going, how am I going to do this?
You must have had some sleep that night.
I found an article in a American mini truck magazine on
that American influence
on how to delete door handles, and I went, that'd be cool. Haven't seen that, but I knew that if I went electric, no rego. So fortunately, it has to be mechanical, external mechanical.
Yes.
So that was the process. Not overly difficult, worked really well, and achieved the look I wanted on the outside. And in the initial build, it had no external mirrors at all, like side mirrors, and no door handles, no fuel filler, no badges. So very clean,
very sleek
external lines. And I spoke earlier about, there's that pallet again with the exhaust. So I'm not quite sure why I decided to go with a single exhaust, but because back then that wasn't sort of done.
No.
And when I look at it now, it wasn't big enough, but it sort of looked cool.
Well,
So
it's different. I know.
and it was a little bit along the lines, the show car thing was all about what can I delete. So I've only got one muffler to detail instead of two, one tailpipe, all that sort of stuff. So I imagine that's sort of where it come from. And as I said earlier, so I'm using the spray putty, and the arrangement I had from Berger had carried over from the previous build. So last time Speedsecker, brought in by Berger, and now back to Berger. And like I said, I was doing it myself. So I've obviously got to colour here and wasn't happy with a couple of spots. So you can see a little bit of primer over the wheel arch there where I obviously spotted something I didn't like. And we're working away in that shed with the trophies again.
Yes. Dusty trophies.
Filling it up with paint. And then all that underside now is all ready to go. And the downside this time was it is acrylic, so it had to be cut and polished.
Yes.
So all of those parts, and you can see the diff there. Looks like it's getting the buff treatment as we speak.
So how do we end up with the colour change, Howard? I know, I mean, it was quite a big change because no one had seen anything like this before.
Well, I'd sort of got to a point where, I'd done it twice in burgundy and regretted it because no one knew I'd done it. So I thought if I'm going to do it, I want to really make a change. And I'm sort of following what's happening in the US through the magazines, and a lot of the hot rodders especially were going down that pastel route.
Yeah.
So I'm sort of looking and go, okay, if I'm going to run a pastel colour, what am I going to be comfortable with? And I'd sort of made up my mind that aquary blue was where I was at. And I went down to the local paint store that I used to use, which was the Colonax, called Colonax, and they were primarily house, but they used to do all the Julon and Berger products. And we went in there and I said to them, this is where I want to go. So he said, come out the back. And they were pretty good. They were ex custom car guys. They had mini minors and custom bloody angulars and all sorts of stuff. And they were probably 15 years older than me. So we went out the back and we went, pulling the lids off, and we grabbed translucent blue and translucent green, 50-50, got aqua.
There you go. That easy.
The only downside was translucent didn't cover very well. So it took more
Many
coats than you would probably like, but whether it was that give it that pop, because it definitely was a colour that really worked. And then once we obviously put the graphics on it, it really stood out. But it was interesting that I took the car to the first Summernats, and by the time we got back the following year, there was probably 15 cars that colour. And then the same happened when I did the violet on the next build. The same thing happened. The following year, you get a whole lot of violet cars. So, obviously people like the colour. And it went down that track.
You could say you're a bit of a trendsetter, Howard.
Oh.
Rodney Root would be happy about it.
So I'm doing the paint. I'm chipping away. Obviously, when you look at these, working through the process, have a look at the floor.
Very blue.
Very blue. The old acrylic everywhere. And working our way through the process. So what I'm working towards now is to get the colour done so that I can start working towards getting the graphics organised and getting that done. So that was my neighbour. He was the manager of the local Coles store that owned the house next door. And he used to come over and get caught up a bit in what we're doing. Get roped in. He used to do a bit of rubbing. So there's them pain in the arse front guards, see?
Geez, you're really happy about doing that.
So that sort of made life difficult. And as you can see, everything on these cars painted inside and out. So, I mean, it was a fair bit of paintwork going on, and then it all had to be polished inside and out. And remembering, this is like 7-month build. And still going to work.
This is in your spare time.
This is in my spare time, So back under the grapevines, giving things a coat of paint late in the year. So there's that bonnet, and I zoomed in on that, and I noticed that it's flat around the hole, but it's still all welded up and filled in. So obviously took on the challenge and did another bonnet. So I've got it all blue now, and I'm in the process of working my way down the graphics. So I've already had 2 logos for the car. There was the original Rock Solid, and then when it changed to Rock Solid 2, we changed the graphics on the boot lid, and I thought I'd go a bit more and put something on the back door. And the photo here now is of Rock Solid of Rock 2 in the second stage of burgundy, and I had Ralph from Raffle's Designs do the t-shirt design for me, and he'd sort of copied what I'd done with my local sign writer on the boot, and I spoke to him about working with him to do the graphics on Rock 3. So he put his crazy mind into action, and came up with a design that he sent up, and I said, yeah, let's do it. And when he came up, the plan was to put that design on the car, on the back door. And the process is with a photocopy, you'd put the design onto a clear
like
sheet,
an overhead projector type.
put it in the projector, shoot it on the car,
trace
you can
it
then
out.
trace it out.
And
when that process happened, what was meant to be this big got bigger and bigger and bigger. And you can see there, the next photo there is the Candy Apple Spray Chief. So Spray Chief was a local paint company in Adelaide.
Okay.
So Ralph said, I'm going to need, some light blue, some dark blue, some red, whatever. So I went to Spray Chief and bought a litre of each. And I've still got some of those tins out the back. And I've got some old footage here now that I don't even recall where the camera came from. I'm pretty sure I borrowed it off someone. Might have been the Clare Brothers, I think, that had the Shell survey. And fortunately, we shot a fair bit of footage of Ralph doing the graphics. Now, what I'm going to show you now is a very short version of it. And just prior to this video going up, there'll be a long version as its own YouTube program. Of the graphics on Rock 3. So if you like what you're watching here, you'll be able to go on and watch the whole thing. You didn't even know about that, did you?
No, I didn't know about that.
So Louise has already put that together. It's sitting there and it'll go up just before this goes up.
I'll have to get the popcorn ready and sit back and enjoy that.
So what we're going to show you now is I'm going to dub us over the top of what's going on in the show. And like I said, it was meant to be this big. Have a look at that. There's Lee walking in the background.
And Lee's always in shot.
So you got to laugh. No mask.
No.
No mask. And the kids are walking around. And I mean, it is acrylic. And in a lot of cases, it's base coat, which is not so bad. So we're going to get cleared over. And this is the start of that candy. So that little graphic that was going to be on the back door.
So wasn't it just going to be the back door?
It's gone the whole car.
How did it end up doing that?
I'm not really sure. So I'll just see if I can turn the volume up. We can't hear it.
I'm sure you know how that got a little bit bigger. Because I heard a little story that someone grabbed a projector and said, let's see how big we can make this thing on the side.
That's what happened. So we ended up like the whole side of the car. And Ralph's going, no way, like that's just too much. I can't do that much, like I've only got a week, that's crazy. So as it turned out, we locked him in the shed day and night for 7 days.
Legend. He did an awesome job.
I think he went on strike on the Wednesday and said, if I'm going to the pub for a pub meal, you're either on my own or the rest of it. So we went out that night to keep him on the job. But you can imagine that was all hand cut. So every line is cut in, and then the pin lines are obviously done with tape, and you can just see here, and like I say, there's a lot more footage on this other show. It was too much for us to cut it down, but the process he's working through here when it comes back into focus is putting the highlights on the neon so that it looks 3D, and then you can already see he's done a bit of outline around it, and he works with that and changes it.
It's very impressive.
It sounds like a delivery.
It does.
And then once he got finished, this is me applying the clear.
This is the plumber's son.
So this is that's it. So
it took a few coats of clear here, didn't it?
The problem was I was just horrified at cutting through. So I've painted it, rubbed it, painted it, and I'm going, it won't cover. And part of the process when he was doing all of those colours with it, that he was priming as well, and I'm going, you don't have to prime, Ralph. No, I want to prime it, get the colours, to go right. So it had really got to a point where it was quite thick.
Yep.
So then I'm in a process where I'm trying to to fill all that with clear because I wanted it to be dead flat.
Yep. It's a technical glitch. That's all right. So yeah, there was a lot of clear went on there, and then a fair bit of cutting.
So yeah, I cleared it.
Yep.
To what I thought might be enough. Rubbed it. Oh, still a few, and it had lines. That white panel you're looking at there now on the still photo.
Yep.
There's lines in that were done with a pin line, and it had all of the product on top of that. So I'm trying to run up and down.
Yeah.
You'll see in the long version where I've got the fan turned right down, and it looks like I'm painting the graphics.
Yeah.
And I'm doing that with clear, just trying to fill it up.
Yeah.
So I never expected it to last as long as it did because it had a massive amount of clear.
Yes.
Ridiculous amount of clear.
Yeah.
And you could see it.
Yep.
You know, when you looked at it, it looked really deep because it was deep.
Mm.
But I didn't want to cut through it.
No.
At that point in time, I either
It's
had
not
to
something you could just readily repair.
bring him 9 hours to get him back
He wouldn't come back.
or fix it myself.
Yeah.
So what I've done now is just put some photos in that show you some of the process. So this is now doing the shadowing on the triangles. So the triangle's on. And I don't have a massive amount of photos, and some of the ones I had weren't that good.
Yep.
And you can see by the back wheel there, that was his sort of trial piece that he would say, "Oh, this is what I can do.
Yep.
You're happy with that? Yeah, we'll do that."
If you check out the bio, you'll remember that in the bio.
Exactly. And all those fluoros were Solver.
Signwriter's painting, wasn't it?
Yeah, for doing, on the window of the shop.
Yes.
Sale, that Signwriters come and do.
My mother used to do. She used to do that sort of stuff.
So they were just, flat acrylic.
Yeah.
So it should never have lasted.
No.
As it has. So it's still to this day really nice and bright. So you can see there it's looking a little bit thin on. So that's where he'd then gone back in and continued to add more of the haze. You see how thick it is there now? Like it's really thin in the rock.
Yep.
And then here it's quite bulky.
Yep.
So we'd stand there having that discussion and go, no, more of that. Yeah, and to get it to sort of look like it was. And at this point in time now, of course, he's gone. I'm clearing. Took me about a week, I think, to get to a point where I was happy.
Yeah.
And then as I'd spoken before, you might have seen some of the masking in newspaper. Don't use newspaper.
No.
Because there was quite a few black smudges around that went under the clear.
Rookie error.
We learn all these things.
Yeah.
But you can see there, no door handles, no nothing, no fuel fillers,
So
looking
clean.
really slick. So that was pretty much the paint process. And there's a good shot there of Ralph and I. So that was the first Summernats 3, where it won top graphics.
Yep.
And I mean, I think every show it ever went to, it won custom paint or graphics or whatever they termed it at that event because it really was a standout thing at the time.
And it was like I said, trendsetter. It was one of the first
to
be done.
And,
so
I mean, it doesn't take long within 12 months. You know, people were obviously going to Ralph going, hey, I want something like that.
Yep.
And other people were doing it, and there was more and more of it around. So we got the paint on it. I don't have timelines anymore. I have no concept in my mind whether we're a month out, 6 weeks out, 2 months out, but we didn't have a lot of time. But I'd obviously made up my mind to do things as well as I could, because you can see even the motor's been bare metal, because originally it was burgundy, then it was blue iridescent, and now we're back to acrylic blue. And the same with the trans, it's been a couple of colours as well. So it looks like I was trying to do the right thing. And then I'd gone to the aluminium water pump at this stage. I think it went on for this build, and everything's starting to get cleaned up. So all of those, Russell fittings were all getting changed to body colour. Lots and lots of body colour. And then all those ancillary parts that have been ground and painted and polished. And then see that big red hose running under the top rail there? That was a fire suppression system.
Oh, okay.
That I seen at the Adelaide Hot Rod Show, I think. And it basically had this big aluminium bottle inside the car.
Yeah, okay.
With a lever, and if you had an engine bay fire, you hit the button and it charged the engine bay without lifting the bonnet, because we all know when you lift the bonnet, that's the problem.
Yep, exactly.
So it had 2 nozzles in the top of the radiator support panel.
Okay.
But I liked it because it was something I could put on the board.
Yes.
and it was a big aluminium bottle, like a polish. So I thought, we'll
like
have one of those.
yes.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
We'll add that with the nitrous bill in the nitrous bottle. So it was always about, you know, the showman more than practicality.
Well, I mean, you knew how to get the points and you know, appeal to the judges, because that's what
make
it's
a
about.
difference.
You're trophy hunter.
Trophy hunter, that's exactly right. So it's starting to move along now. The doors are on, trim's starting to go in, and we'll get to trim in a minute. I've got a separate section on that. And then all the ancillaries. So you can see now all those brakes, the headlights, all those bracketry, everything's got to be changed colour again. So we're now all blue. I don't know what I was doing with the wiring.
Redoing it by the looks of it.
But I do recall looking at it now that Street Machine did an article in one of the issues on rewiring, and I do recall that I had some sort of really weird, wonderful things going on that you wouldn't do today.
No.
But obviously, you know, people were thinking that was cool, look what he's done there.
Yeah.
And I think at one point I actually had the little side panel on the dash. I used to take it off for the show so the judge could look in behind the dash and see how nicely the wires were routed.
Had a good wiring that you'd done.
Yeah. Because once again, they all look good, so how do you achieve more points?
Well, I guess that's what you found with the burgundy version, was that people didn't appreciate how much work had gone into the car to a certain extent.
Yeah, but I mean,
you couldn't notice it as much.
In a lot of cases, they don't know either.
Yeah.
You know, and I think primarily people would put a panel under the dash so you can't see under there.
Yeah.
Where I was saying, hey, look in here what I've done. Not only does it look good on the outside, it looks good on the inside. And then when we went to something like Tailspin, it went to the whole next level, where all the photos and the books and all that we gave the judges showed how the car was built inside and out, and was unbelievably finished in all the places you can't see. So it was sort of the start of that, I guess.
Yep.
And you can see now, it's out in the sun, having a bit of sunbake with the poodle.
Keeping guard. Yep.
So it's looking pretty good. So that's that single exhaust, and I'd made up a aluminium bracket out at the back. I'd seen a few photos with people using aluminium conrods and stuff, but I didn't have one of those, so I just made it up out of a lump of aluminium that we had kicking around.
Yeah.
Louis probably made that. I probably made the cardboard bit, the easy one, and then give it to Louis
I'll
to
give
make
the template. You knock that up.
knock
Louis.
that up. And you can see that mount I was talking about,
Yes.
the RPM look.
Yep.
And there's the front end without the shock in it. There's a good photo in a minute with the shock on it. There you go. So it's a Chev spindle, and then top and bottom A-arms with no caster bar going forward, and then the coilover mounted from the lower. And it's all to do with less unsprung weight, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. I was just...
Looks like you know what you're doing, Mark. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe. And then there's the engine all lollied up. So I hadn't quite finished there, I don't reckon, because it's still got the red fittings on the, you know, as a red and blue.
Yes.
I made them all blue in the end.
Yep.
Because it clashed. Didn't like colours combination, even though one's for fuel and one's for nitrous. Wasn't worrying me too much.
No.
So the trim. So we've gone back now, obviously, prior to paint. So I had made my mind up that I needed a direction for the trim, and part of that was we're going to change the console out to like a late model, which at that point, late model in 1990 was like an EAEB, was the current car. Yep. And then the bit of steel in the back was just to lift the carpet up to get it up to the back of that console and change the shape of the floor. And I don't know why I ended up with that console, whether that we were doing something with taxis and had a spare one, but it would have been something like that. And I've then mounted a stereo into that so I don't have it in the dash.
Yes.
So I wanted that top nice and clean.
Yep.
And this was the stage where we went to the 3 pods.
Yes.
So for those people watching this who don't know a Falcon too well, there's normally 2 pods. One has speedy and then 3 gauges in it for the standard, well, actually idiot lights and stuff in the other side. And then when you went to the GSGT, it had the 4 gauges along the top with the 2 pods with a tacho and a speedo. So what we did here, and my offside Louis did most of the work on this, once we'd conceptually come up with what we wanted to do, we took 3 VDO gauges, pulled them apart and took the mechanisms out of the gauge and mounted it into a round disc the same size as that, so that it had 3 VDO gauges behind the original plastic screen, and then chopped up 2 fascias, plastic welded all together to make what we had. And then what was the 2 idiot lights there turned into the blinkers, the indicators, by memory. And then on the left hand side you can see you've got to have your brake fail light and a headlight switch, and I can't see what the other one was. So that was all made and painted, and he did a really good job, and I did a nice job painting it, and you really couldn't tell. There's a really good photo somewhere in a minute of what it looks like. Must be down further. So that changed that whole thing. So it was silver before and had, you know, flick switches and all that sort of stuff. So we changed that. And then I've got a picture of Cadzilla here, because Cadzilla came out around this time, and I was really taken by the whole car, but the trim in that car I really took to. And you'll see, what you can see in that photo of the seats and all is very similar to what we ended up with in Rock 3. So the trim now, previously, I talked about my mate doing it. So in Broken Hill there was, I think, 3 trimmers, and one of those was Rod Lingard. And Rod was and was a hot rodder, to the point where he spent quite a few years where he used to go to the US and work with one of the big hot rod companies over there and do their trim. And then come back to Australia and work in Australia. And I approached Rod to find out what sort of money, and I really liked his style and the fact that I was going down that sort of the Cadzilla style. And got Rod involved, got a price off him, and I somehow or other convinced myself I could afford to do that. And worked with him to come up with something that was sort of trick, but at the same token, looking for points. All the way through. So you can see now this is pretty much done, so the console's been recovered. So I used to use a company in Adelaide, a guy by the name of Zig from Dash Original, and they used to do like a vacuum seal for the top dash tops and all. So I sent that down to him, got him to recover that for me. I think he'd already done the crash pad earlier. And then we mounted the late model stereo in it, and the actual shifter and all was out of that EAEB model. And there it is there.
It's a Eurovox stereo, if I'm not mistaken.
It could be. Yep, straight from Ford.
They were the gun.
They were the Duck's Guts, were they?
Back in the day.
So that was straight out of a new car. It would have come out of a taxi, because they didn't need a radio. Or we would have put something different in them with the meters and changes and all that sort of thing. And then the switches and all were out of the late model, and we changed all the doors to electric windows. So that process, and you can see there, this was the first time I'd utilised the edge carpets and all with the drop-in panels. You can see there where they glue all the sides in and then make a drop-in base. And we'd gone to retractors, and the side covers are XC, and I'm pretty sure they would have been new XC seat belts. And then the little side in the marker there, that when you open the door up, the lights come on and all, was out of a LTD or a Fairlane or something like that. And the rest of the design was all done by Rod. And then the seats, the styling, I was taking that styling cue from Cadzilla, and it's a really interesting one that with the seats. So they were the XA seat with the headrests cut off them. And when I said to Rod, that's what I want to do, he goes, yeah, that's cool. And then the back of it, the XA had that panel on the back, and so I want to put a seat pocket, like a pocket in the mat pocket in the back. And part of my reasoning for that is just for points. Because it's more work, and if it's done well, you should achieve more points for that than if it hasn't got any.
If it's just plain Jane.
And the head judge at the Summernats works on aeroplanes. So I thought, he'll get that.
He'll appreciate that.
He'll get that. So I'm just working the system.
Yep.
So I said to Rod, this is what I want to do. And then in Cadzilla, it had no piping on the seats.
Okay.
And I said to Rod, I want you to do the seats with no piping. And he said, that's going to look terrible out. I said, no, look at the picture. Look how good this is. He goes, I'm telling you, it's going to look bloody awful. So I said, well, that's what I want. So off I went, and he rings me up the next day and says, or a couple of days.
Yeah.
Go back, he rings me up and says, come out and have a look, I want to show you something. Righto, so I drive out there. Broken Hill's 10 minutes away.
Yeah.
Drive out there, and he goes, righto, there's 2 seats. One with piping, one without. He said, I've got to pull one of them apart.
Yeah.
You tell me which one looks the best. And I went, yeah, you're right. The one with the piping. So he knew.
Yes.
And it's that really is that time when you understand that sometimes you just got to take on board what the tradesman and someone that's worked in that game for a long time
that's
knows.
his specialty.
That's his specialty. So do as you're told.
Yeah.
So he did all that, and I mean,
one of the few times you were wrong, Howard. There you go.
It won. I remember when I was wrong. So
one time.
Underside of the boot lid, spare wheel with the cover.
Yep.
Chasing points, maximum points, and everything trim. Look at that inside.
Yep.
So when you're showing the car, you have it off, and and there was a little toolbox in the floor. You can't see that anywhere, I don't think. There. So that there had a drop-in plate then with all your tools laid out.
Yep.
Yeah. All for points, pretty much. So we spoke last time about changing the fuel tank.
Yes.
So I'd gone to and I see in the engineer's report that it was a galvanised, 16 gauge galvanised fuel tank. And that was a boat tank filler with a little slot in it.
Yeah, okay.
And that was a disaster.
Because it's too small?
It's too small, but it wasn't vented back
to
to the filler neck. In the early cars, they had the hose going back up, so that as the fuel's going in, the air gets out.
Yeah.
So it was a pain to fill up. But anyhow, it looked good. That's what we're all about.
Yep.
So obviously getting close here now, that photo, I don't know whether we're out of sequence or not, or we're running out of photos, but it's moving forward, everything's shiny, and that's that standard grille. And then there's a guy I was spending a bit of time with was the manager out at Woolies at the time, that I'd met through the Chamber and Commerce and stuff. He was a bit of a photo dude, and some of these were his photos, some of the close-ups. It just gives you an idea of what we were doing. There's that hole in that bonnet, Dale. It looks nice and neat. But everywhere you look, it's painted, it's polished.
Yep. There's a lot going on.
The useless fan. And the radiator hose was a big topic on this car. And what I did there was I took a standard radiator hose, cleaned it off with thinners, put a primer on it with some Flex Aid in it. I used to make a product called Flex Aid that went into paint for painting plastic bumpers and stuff. Painted it with that and then painted it with acrylic. It used to last about 2 shows and you had to redo it because the black kept bleeding through. But people just go, "Oh, how'd you do that?" It was something different.
Yep.
It was a pain, but
it was impressive.
And I think eventually got rid of it. So the shot from the back there, you can see the number plate.
Yep.
So that's another one of those stories where I'm out there late, 1 in the morning or whatever, and I'm getting down to the last yard, and I'm going, this yellow plate's going to look terrible on this car with all these graphics, and it was the dark yellowy colour, the New South Wales plate.
Yeah, the non-reflective.
And I'm thinking, what am I? I'll paint them. So I started looking, and then I realised they were aluminium because they were special order. But the standard plate wasn't Ali.
Oh, okay.
It was only the premiums. Anyhow. So I've gone, these are aluminium. So I paint stripped them and then polished the Rock 3 and all of the surrounds and everything, and then back masked and painted it. So the actual Rock 3 was polished aluminium, cleared over. So they were a beacon. They looked bloody awesome.
Yeah.
And then where it's mounted, when we were down in Adelaide, that's what Louis was doing. He boxed all of that back bumper in so that it was all in there. And then the number plate light, I think, was an XF Falcon number plate light. And I look at it now and I think that looks really cool. But have a look at the gaps on the boot lid.
I'm going to say the critical eye would say your gaps are bloody terrible, Howard.
Yeah, so I made fixed hinges on that boot lid. And because that
non-adjustable.
That was cool
fixed
because I don't like
hinges.
boot hinges. That was cool. But the problem was the adjustment wasn't quite there, and there was no way to fix it.
No.
Well, there probably was. Just cut it off and add a bit on. But that's what we'd got a long way down the track. But door gaps at that point weren't as critical as they are.
This is 1990, people, not
32 years ago.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So all the rest of it, I mean, remembering again that getting taillight lenses and all was not an issue. The cars were still relatively new, and then it's got that nice look now with the coilovers and from now on the underside. And then I'd see one other thing there that I really wanted to mention in the build. See the number plate, the back window light.
Okay.
The high brake light.
Mm-hmm.
So Rob Fazella, Fuzzy's brother-in-law, is a local hot rodder and a carpenter, and he was making his own aluminium bits.
Right.
And he made a few things for his hot rod, and I said to him, mate, could you make me a couple of bits for the car? So he ended up making the number plate light, the internal mirror, billet internal mirror, all handmade, and a lot of it with timber tools. Pete Ryan is his name. They had a beautiful 32 5-window coupe, 3-window coupe, nice car. Had a lot of nice cars, and he made those for me, and all, him and I worked out what we wanted, but they were a really nice piece in the car. You can see the aluminium mirror hanging down there. So that was, stuck on the glass like original, but he actually made all the bits to do it. And this is prior to getting the catalogue out and saying, I'll have that one.
Yep.
They'd started to come out, but he's very much like me. I can make that.
Yeah.
So he was doing it, and he made the plates and all for the air cleaner as well. So out in that prime spot on the front lawn, looking all pretty sweet. I'd say that's after its first show because it looks pretty cool. And then there's that green bomb that was next to it.
the shell.
So that was, that's in my biography, but it's not in the build series because it was a 6-week repaint basically and a bit of a tidy up. So that was our drive car. So someone put a post up the other day on Facebook, his and hers, which is probably about right. So we're pretty much done. I think I've covered all of the bits and pieces. For those that haven't watched earlier ones, it's 351, with a cam and all the bits and pieces. A couple of 450s on the Ram, FMX, 9-inch, and stock axles, all that sort of stuff. We weren't into the big over-the-top type gear at that stage, and that was the car. So this was the first Summernats, so we'll cover a couple of the shows here, and then there's a bit more to go. So this was a real death knock to get to this event, and that's it there. So that's Mark's Tirana. So I don't know if it's the first or second year. I'd say it's the first year.
That's Howard's shed.
Building B.
Building B.
Out the front of Building B, and that's Legal 8 that I spoke about earlier. That Mark worked on and did a lot of work on that car. And then so that was Summernats. The car was fresh, green. Can't even remember what it did, but the primary aim was to get there and get on the road and start doing. So this is back at Wagga. And torrential rains and all sorts of dramas there, and the driving events were in the mud. And that particular year, I had a little tap on the rear brake so you could do a little skid, before you go out and do your go woe. Well, I forgot to turn it back on. So I got hooting down to go woe, and it didn't stop at all because I only had front brakes, and hit the hay bales. So you'll see that in a minute. But fortunately I'd done enough. So backed up the Australian title. A couple of nice trophies out the front. And then the next stage is to get it all cleaned up. So we're out driving in the mud, we've hit the hay bales, we've done all those sorts of things. So this is what a lot of people probably don't understand with a car like this, is that when you're doing it, and it's still much the same today, a lot of the top cars now get built, and because they so many hours and so much money invested in it, they don't do the events the first year. They come back the second year and have a go. And I understand that completely, because the amount of work to keep a car of this level, whether it was back then or now, is a massive amount of work. So my father-in-law used to always say, can you tell me when the car's together? Because he used to come over and go, it's in pieces again. I'll never see the car together. And he'd never seen this one together. No. So I'd say, well, turn up the day before I go. Yeah. Because it'll be back together. So there's Louise helping Dad.
Yep. She's still helping Dad. Yeah.
So this was the aftermath of the hay bale. So it had hit the bumper, pushed back onto the guard, kinked the guard a bit, and chipped the graphics.
Oh. The worst possible thing.
Pushed it back onto the guard.
Yeah.
So Howard got the gear out and flicked a bit of paint around and repaired the graphics up. And the next one there, the bonnet, obviously the bonnet was off to do that. And I thought, oh, that's not shiny enough. I'll give that a quick lick. While that's off, I'll fix that.
Yep.
And then we did a full circuit with it. So that's Melbourne, the Melbourne Hot Rod Show. I love that photo because I'd always wanted to win a real trophy, and to me, a rod branded cup is a real trophy. So that's pride of place somewhere kicking around here. And that was the display we built for the car.
Yep.
And combined the blues and that was the carpet out of the lounge room. Remember the carpet in the lounge room?
Yes.
Well, when we changed the carpet, I cut it into squares, turned it into carpet squares. Saved me buying.
That'll make a good car display, honey.
Yep. Yeah. So there's the mug. So that was top street machine.
Yep.
So while we're out there, I'd met Steve Turner from Turner Apparel. And he said, do a shirt. And he was a drag race guy. He used to do all the drag race shirts, but he'd start doing some street machine ones as well. So I hooked up with Steve, and he introduced me to Steve Vespo.
Yep.
So Vespo was doing all his artwork. Mm-hmm. So Vespo, even though Ralph did the graphics, Vespo did the shirt.
Yep.
And then, as you know, my involvement with Vespo carried through quite a lot of builds and a lot of work still today, actually. And I've worked with a lot of designers, and this was my first introduction to Steve. And then that's down in Adelaide at the Australian Street Machine Federation Show and Shine, outdoor show. Like them shorts, mate?
They're almost criminal, those, aren't they? No, they're very hard-earned trophies. So
then we used to venture up to Brisbane,
which
is a bit of an effort from Broken Hill. It was 18, 19 hours. And at that show was when I first started talking to Chick about potentially buying the car. Mm-hmm. Well, the initial deal I put to Chick was, I reckon we should raffle my car. And he goes, what do you mean? I said, well, I reckon we could raffle it.
Yep.
And whatever tickets we sell, I keep the first 20 grand and we'll split what we get after that. I'd be happy with that. And I want to get about 30-ish out of it.
Yep.
So he goes, I'll leave it with me and I'll talk to my bloody legal people or whatever. Yep. And it turned out, not like today where everyone's doing it, it turned out there was too many, because they were ACT based, I think partly.
Yep.
There was too many hurdles to jump. And in the end, I did a deal with him where he actually physically bought the car off me for 35 grand. And the deal was, there's a couple of things. One is it had to be registered, like legally registered.
Yep.
And then secondly, I had to help sell the programs. So I don't understand.
The first part was easy, wasn't it, compared to the second part? Anyway.
So the arrangement was you bought a $5 program, got a free ticket in the car.
Yeah.
So Chick just needed to sell 1,000 programs, and he was going to make some money and give some money to charity and all that sort of stuff. So what happened from that though is I ended up needing to get the car engineered.
Yep.
So as I've already spoke about, it had no external mirrors.
One of them.
And had a lot of changes to it.
Yep.
So this is a copy of the original of the actual engineer's report, and this was done after the event.
Yep.
So some of those changes that were required were primarily cosmetic things like the mirrors.
Yeah.
And then the Hornet scoop passed the vision test, fortunately, but it couldn't be open, so I had to fill the front in.
Yep.
Little bits and pieces. And then it was interesting when I looked through this, because I haven't looked at it for a long, long time. It was running a 7 and a 10 by 15 in the report. And the interesting part is, someone asked me a question the other day on one of the programs about, old registered cars. So this report's still effective and current.
Yes.
and that car could be registered today, provided it hasn't been changed from these, which it hasn't, could be fully registered with the 10s and all the other changes. And it's interesting, it goes through and talks about the Hornet scoop, the external door latches, the instrument panel, the fact that it's got an XE steering column in it, which I don't even remember putting in it, the fuel tank, the battery box, all the things, changes to the seats,
them all,
and then in the back it's got the diagrams, because the seats and belts were changed, it's got the diagrams with the measurements of the heights of the belts and that it all complied. So it's really quite interesting to go back and read all of that. And then it had a brake test, and the fact that it's running a 4-bar coilover rear, it's all noted in there. And in December 1990, it was made legit. So that ticked that box. And then the other thing was, and I'm sure there'll be some photos here somewhere, and I thought, I've put this one in, Louise can put up. Conjunction of the vehicle was found to be structurally sound and exhibits a high level of workmanship in its construction and reconditioning.
There you go.
There you go. So it was an interesting read the other day. So we did a few more shows, and then obviously we did this was at the Sydney Motor Show to do the Win My Car, where Chick and I were there selling programs, and at Bathurst, on the Bathurst Straight there, that was a really interesting couple of days with the comments from race car people about the car, and that engine can't work because it's got no wires and all those sorts of comments, which is really cool. And that's Chick and I with our shirts on, and that was in Sydney, selling programs.
The motor show, I think it was, wasn't it?
The Sydney Motor Show, So this photo here now, you can see by the date there, so this is September 1990, so this is in back in Canberra for the ACT Street Machine Show, and it was sort of the launch of the giveaway.
Right.
And they had driving events and all that sort of stuff, so the car was there and on display. And in that building B, I've mentioned to you numerous times, Dale, about the light, how the type of light there and the type of glass and all really makes cars stand out and look different in there. And I'd sort of half seen it, but not really, that where I'd taken the door handles out, the filler I'd used had a red hardener in it, and because the paint was a translucent paint, the hardener was bleeding through, and you could see this almost like a bruise coming through where the door handles were. And it was spotted in Building B when it was on display there. So Chick's manager says, "How there's a bit of a problem with this car that we're buying, mate." And I go, "What's that, mate?" And he goes, "That." And I'm going, "Oh, geez, I haven't seen that before." So I said, "Don't worry about it, I'll fix it." So I left there and come back.
You're true to your word.
Went back and seen Colinax and said, "What do I got to do?" And they said, "You're going to have to put a bleed sealer on it." So I backmasked the graphics, and you can see in the photos here, and I've got some photos, but the camera was having one of them days as usual. That I backmasked the graphics and then sprayed a full black bleed sealer over the areas that needed to be fixed, which is basically those bogged areas through the side of the car. And then put a primer over it, sanded it all back out, removed the masking, checked all my edges, make sure I hadn't messed anything up with the graphics, remasked it all again, put the blue on it, took it all off, cleared it. I had to put the highlight back on the outside of the neon, which was a bit of fun, doing a couple little touch-ups there, and then all ready to go back for the Summernats for the giveaway. And there it is there, and to this day it still looks wonderful, which is really cool.
It does, yes.
So that was one of them learning curves, was like, "Yeah mate, I'll fix it." I took it home with no idea at all how I was going to do it. So that was a bit of a challenge, but we got through that, and that's Mark there, Mark Sanders and myself, and you can see Lee and Louise in the car. So this is now Summernats 4, so this is the second year, and this is about to head off and lead the Super Cruise. But before we did that, we had to have a go at trying to win this Grand Champion again. So the car was going well now, and I had the brakes
sorted.
turned on. So we're doing all of those driving events, and I've got another video now that's made up of some footage that I've taken from all over the place, and I think it's old enough now that no one's going to bark at me for that. So these are the days where you could actually cruise around on the Friday and the Saturday. And then it was interesting that this was in there, so that's that t-shirt I was talking about. And all the talks about colours.
Was the colour. But I feel that graphics is becoming so big this year.
True, and there's a lot of good examples right
You're right,
outside
Chick.
the door of the place.
Graphics are just starting to happen this year. Howard Astill was a little bit ahead of everybody else at last year's.
I'd say a long way ahead, Howard, but anyway.
There's lots of fine examples here this year.
I just remember there was a car turned up, a little RX3 with WOK, WOK3 on it with the same graphics.
Howard Astill from Broken Hill. And Howard is one of the big winners of Summernats fame. He brought this car here some years ago in a completely
Takes you back, Howard.
It does, mate. I mean, and this was a time where people are always amazed that you turn up with a car like that, and I was never frightened to get into it. Because to me it was part of it. That grand champion meant you need to go out and punish it.
And waiting there to interview him is the intrepid John Putty. So it's over to you, John.
Howard Astill, you must be the man of the moment, or the car of the moment. You having second thoughts about giving up this?
Hadn't slept much by looking at it.
Rock solid.
Yeah, it was getting a bit
Hanging in
away.
there.
Spent 9 years building the thing, and today's really been the
Look at the
highlight
dust on it.
the whole time. We've won a lot, but to win the Summernats, Jovic is excellent.
You must have mixed emotion of you must be elated, but at the same time a little bit sad.
Yeah, I've had a bit of a tear today actually. It's been a big day, and tomorrow's going to be very difficult for sure.
The car's a credit to you, mate, and everybody around here sort of has acknowledged it deserves to win. And I understand going out here today, you're very, very serious about doing well in these events.
Well, you actually just asked me to carry a camera, but I'm not prepared to take the risk of not being able to see or whatever. It means a lot to me, and got to give it my best.
Oh, we understand, mate. Good luck out there, and we'll catch up with you later.
Now, Howard has to do well in Spear Spud, go to Motorcana, go to Woa, and possibly the burnout competition.
You got the easy part, Howard. You're
Yeah,
hanging
the
on to
spear of the
steering
spud,
wheel.
mate. Yeah.
But you accumulate points.
It was hard on the ribs.
in each of
I
those.
Everyone used to say, because when you hit the brakes, you're
Yeah.
sliding up and down the window
Yeah.
opening, whacking your ribs on the A and B
He's
pillar.
already done well in the judge category. Wouldn't it be a paradox?
But the trick
if
was,
he
is
competed at
used
all
to,
times,
you know,
very,
spear it
very
like this
well,
long.
Yeah.
We learnt you get out the window and
Yeah.
spear it and have your hand right there, because the spud used to fall off, because about 50,000 people have speared the spuds.
Yep. No barbs on the spear.
Yep.
Howard would be able to do is go away and say, well,
And what you lob it in the back window, do you?
Yeah, and throw it on the seat.
I'd like to see him do it. He is an exceptionally nice guy, and a real credit to the sport. Has been
Like that, just throw it in the
Just like
back.
that.
Because when you finish, you had to turn up with how many spuds it was.
He is doing extremely well out there in the Spear Spud competition. He obviously had the car for 9 years, as he said.
Yeah.
And he's serious about this.
and that guy out there with him, Mark, that's pretty well Howard's best friend.
Give it the beans there.
Yep, watch this.
Building the car. And came in there pretty
There's not a lot of
hard.
traction on
He's
grass.
trying hard, so good on him if he does well.
And Howard's over in the Motorcana area now, throwing it around. Very good of our camera crews to be diligent and follow that guy through now.
Give it a flick.
Yes, you like avoiding the hay bales this time. It's good to see.
Bird Spear convertible, and there's the Falcon from Broken Hill. Howard.
Different colour there, isn't it?
It's, yes, a bit of a different light.
So check out the 90s, mate. You see the Louise there hanging out the window on the front
Yeah,
seat?
sitting on the front seat. There's them shorts again. You like them?
Mate, it was a competition who could get the loudest shorts. So that would have been from Summernats 3, that one, by the way.
Absolutely. And then we were preparing ourselves for the big award of the weekend. Top Street Machine overall. That is the culmination of points that the top street machiners in Australia have gathered all weekend in the driving events, the People's Choice, and of course the judging. And who should win it? Howard Astill in his beautiful Sedan Falcon. What a fabulous winner, what a fabulous car, and what a fabulous weekend.
And it was a fabulous weekend.
It was.
And the culmination of that was the guy that won it, Mario, had his licence but didn't have a vehicle, obviously, to tow it away. It was almost like, you've won the car, come and pick it up.
Yep.
So I think it was his uncle come down in the Monaro with the trailer, with
Yep.
a hire trailer, and put it on, and away it went. And of course, we all know he's still got it today.
Yes.
So I've thrown together a couple of quick photos here of some of the footage to give you a bit of an idea. You know, back then there was so many more magazines than
Yes,
we've got
there
today.
was. Yep.
And that one there looking very tight, that would have been the first year. And of course, what I'm going to finish with is that people that know the car know that for Summernats 30, so we're now talking 25 years later,
26 years later, yep.
26 years later, that I got a call from Owen Webb to say, look, it's the 30th anniversary this year, you're still in contact with Mario, do you think we could get the car back for that? So I contacted Mario and said to him, look, you know, the boys want it there, and if you're keen, I'd like to bring it back here and I'll give it a tidy up.
Yep.
And at my expense, and take it down there and put it on display, knowing quite well it had a few little changes made to it. And as you can see in that first photo, the bit of extra colour here and there, and he agreed to that, so it came back here and we got into it then. So it was all complete, very few changes besides a bit of paint here and there. So we hop straight in, give it a tidy up, and there's a good example of that joint in that that front stone tray behind the number plate. And then it had obviously done a few miles. He used it on and off, used it a bit early and then put it away and then got it out again and used it again.
Good to see it had been used.
It had got used a bit, which was good, and was showing a little bit of wear and tear. So this initial clean-up was really about making it look good for the Nats, and you know, a couple of the shocks were leaking and those sorts of things. So I put it up on the hoist and put the tarps under it that I used to use for the Mustang. Give it a full pressure clean, and then we hopped in, and Darren and I, and pulled a lot off it and then started polishing, and all of those sort of polished aluminium and stainless parts all were looking fairly untidy. And with the nitrous, I'd made all the fittings in that nice cyan metallic blue that I talk about, and someone had changed them to body colour. So I stripped all that down. Darren was doing the polishing on the engine, starting to come up there now, and then he hopped on the buff and tidied up all the bits off the nitrous, and then I masked it all up. And
there was a fair bit of work in getting this back,
masking it up.
The amount of fiddly little bits.
It was, and the idea was, you know, you could go in and buy all new fittings and all, but it was really about making it hang together and look good. And then the carbies had clearly been leaking and stuff, so Dave from next door come over. He's an outboard motor mechanic, so him and I put a kit through the carbies and then put a bit of paint back on them, because they always had that. Can't think of the colour that was called.
I don't know. Was it a Spray Chief?
Yeah, that was. Yeah, there they are. Yeah, one of them. And the air cleaner, I think, might have been changed. So, you know, we painted. You can see stuff in the background there that needed a coat. So we cleaned all that up, and then John up at PPG, Johnny Aristas, mixed up some colour for me in 2K, and got rid of all of those gaudy looking colours off the grill and the scoop. Got a new finer filter made up for it, and just worked my way around and run the wand over it. And then it had a few little door dings and stuff in it. So Zoran, the local PDR man, come in for me and
got rid of the dents.
Spent a few hours getting rid of those, and it really started to pop and look good. And I pretty much ran over it with, and there'll be a photo here in a minute, there we go. So I used a big lambswool pad with the heavy cut, and then went to a foam pad with the heavy cut, and then went to a machine polish, and then the sealer glaze, and then whacked a wax on it. And it had some issues. The boot had some bit of bubbling and stuff in it, humidity blisters, but primarily it was looking pretty slick
for a 32-year-old car, and
in acrylic with too much paint on it that had been
sign writing, graphics, colours,
and all that sort of stuff. So I mean, it had never seen a lot of light. No. I don't think it had been garaged a lot, so that it had always been garaged, but it was garaged in an area where it wasn't getting a lot of sunlight on it. So I think that helped it. And as you can see there, it came up with a really good shine. And then at this point in time, I had no way of moving it. So Adam and Kylie from Tailspin came down from Canberra with their trailer, and I entrusted it to them to take it back to Canberra for me. And then we just got a tilt tray to run it over because they were debuting at the same show.
Yes.
So it was a pretty big weekend for me that weekend. And pride of place inside Building B, inside my hall. And then I was fortunate enough to still be hanging on to some of the old boards and things that was around from 30 years prior that I'd had stuck away in the container somewhere. So we put on a nice show, I thought. So that was Summernats 30. The car came back, and then had a bit of a chat to the owner, and he said, look, I wouldn't mind making it a bit more drivable because it had some mechanical issues and stuff going on because it had been 30 odd years old. So Mario said, look, what's it going to cost me if we do this and this? So what we decided to do is put some new disc rotors on it because they were the original ones I had chrome plated. And I said to him, as far as I'm concerned, if you're going to put some miles on it, I would recommend getting rid of them. We rebuilt all the calipers, I think by memory the master cylinder as well. Cleaned out the radiator, put a shroud on it with a thermo. And then the front suspension, you can see the photo there, that bottom wishbone had 2 bolts into that bit of solid, and it had a tendency to want to put too much load on the front one and bend that bolt. And I think it did break one at one stage. So I got those massive bolts, high tensile bolts, and drilled that solid out and put a bolt right through. So that it, with a nylock on it. So then it wasn't under tension for a starter. It wasn't sort of under load. Because once again, it was single shear, not the best design in the world, but you can actually see the drill bit there. So we drilled both ways, and we're fortunate enough that everything lined up and we got those in. And then the diff had some leaks, and then we had a lot of trouble getting the axles out. And like I said earlier, they were only standard axles. And when we finally got them out with a great amount of effort, they were really difficult. They were all twisted and locked into the centre. So we ended up putting some billet axles in it and had the centre rebuilt. And all new brakes, and I think the primary deal was to actually do a prom for someone, but put some rego back on it. So we rebuilt the brakes, the radiator, did the shroud, painted everything blue again, and then got it all back together. And then at the same time, Street Machine contacted me and said, look, we'd really like to feature the car again. So I suggested we go down by the lake, where I go walking nowadays. And the day we went down there, because there's never anybody there, the day we've gone down to shoot it, the local bloody remote control yachts are down there. So we're sort of trying to work amongst them. So they set up and did the photos down there. And these were a couple of their photos that they had for that feature. And that was a really good one of the trim that they'd done, with the doors open from the back seat. And that's that good photo I was talking about from the dash with the gauges on the left-hand side. So that's pretty much the story up until 4 or 5 years ago. I haven't spoken to Mario since we've done that work, but I'd presume the car still sits the same way. So it's still there, and last time I spoke to him, he loves the car, has no intention of ever getting rid of it. He's had plenty of offers over the years, but it's stayed with him. And from all I know, that's his intention to continue to do that. And it's just so wonderful to know that it still looks as good as it does.
Yeah, it's a bit of history, isn't it?
All together. Well, a big part of my life.
Absolutely, absolutely. Put you on the path to, doing what you've done.
Still doing it,
to this day. So
that rounds it up, Dale.
Yep.
And I thank everybody for joining us, for those that have hung around for the long haul to see such an icon car and how it ended up where it did. And would be remiss not to thank our friends at Lovells for their support, and we'll continue to come to you every fortnight. We've got a lot going on with the channel, so make sure you subscribe. Put your notifications on, because there was another video went up today from the weekend.
Hit the like button, make a comment. Howard loves answering comments.
Yeah, I'm always answering comments. What are you doing now? I'm on the phone answering comments. So thanks for coming along. Thanks for your time again, Dale.
Thanks, Howard.
Appreciate it.
Yep.
And bye for now.
We'll see you next episode.
Next episode for sure. A couple of weeks.